So, I've got a great recipe for you and you're going to love it. This is grain-free, gluten-free granola. It's also sugar-free, meat-free, it's vegan, it's it actually, well, it's not nut-free, okay? So if you can't eat nuts, sorry about it, right? Now, one of my favourite foods in the world was always cereal, okay? I was a carb addict, and if I still have any addictions at all, it is still to eating in particular. I find that I do just still need food a little bit, but I'm getting less and less, requiring less and less food. So I really want to make this, okay, so cereal was always my favourite. Granola in particular, I loved. However, along my journey, I've come to realise that oats are one of the worst foods that you could be choosing, unfortunately. And I know that people are incredibly addicted to oats, and it is an incredibly addictive food. Okay. So we're going to be using, instead of oats, very similar to oats, these are buckwheat flakes, okay? They do have quite a strong taste to them if you use too much, okay? So making bread just with buckwheat flakes doesn't necessarily turn out, just with buckwheat flour, doesn't necessarily turn out great, okay? So often you'll need to mix that up with some other gluten-free grains as well, okay? So the first thing we want to do is we've got here a mixture of nuts and seeds, okay? So you can use whatever your favourite nuts and seeds are. I like to use sunflower seeds because they're really easily available and they're fairly cheap as well. You can make quite a nice milk just with sunflower seeds. So, you know, if you are kind of going more plant-based, then, you know, that might be something that you like to do. Now, what I'm doing here, as you'll see, is I'm actually separating some of the nuts. I'm taking out about half of the nuts and seeds, okay? And I want to keep some of these nuts and seeds sort of quite whole. And then we're going to blend the rest, okay? So we want to keep some, like I said, whole. And we put those in our pan. And I'm not going to keep them entirely whole because, you know, they're fairly large. We've got cashew nuts here. So easily we can break the cashew nut, the hazelnut, we can break it in half. We can break these in half. Cashews, hazels, walnuts, very easy to break in half. So that we can, so far. I also have in here Brazil nuts. Now Brazil nuts you can't, which are my favourite, absolutely love Brazil nuts, but you can't actually just break them open. So they do need to be cut. Okay, so I'm just going to get my knife and I'm just going to randomly cut these Brazil nuts. Absolutely love Brazil nuts. Now, the one thing I think I didn't actually say about these nuts is I soaked these nuts overnight. Okay, so I've got these nuts and seeds soaking in water. Now, the reason we do this is because both nuts and seeds have a little, what I call coping mechanism, which is an invisible sac that is known as phytic acid. It is also an enzyme inhibitor. And the way it works is we all know that nuts and seeds are indigestible. But did you also know that grains are indigestible? They also come as a little seed and all the goodness is locked up inside it. It's with this invisible sac. Now, it's only once you soak the nut or the seed that you can get rid of this invisible sac and suddenly the seed becomes bioavailable to you. So all the goodness that's in the nut or the seed becomes bioavailable. And that's the same with grains. So really we should soak our grains, even if it's rice, quinoa, which is really it's a seed. And that's why things like wheat and oats aren't particularly good for you. They're really only good for you if you soak them first, and oats in particular, throw away the soak water. Okay, because otherwise you're going to have the enzyme inhibitor still in the water, and you're going to cook it with the enzyme inhibitor in there. And the way that the inhibitor works is that it makes not only the seeds indigestible, and we all know that nuts and seeds are indigestible because if you've eaten them without being soaked, and then you've gone to the toilet and you look at your poo, and you will find that, oh yeah, I ate some nuts and seeds. They're still in there and they're more or less whole. They've just been kind of crunched, okay? And that is, like I say, their ability, it's what keeps them alive, basically. It's their ability to then, if you went to the toilet in the wild, you would replant the seed and then from it a new tree would grow. But not only does it make it indigestible for the actual nut or seed that you're eating, but if you eat a lot of them, then that enzyme inhibitor will gather up in your stomach and it will actually make other foods that you're eating indigestible, okay? And so that's why quite often, and with bad food combinations as well, people are eating food, it's just getting pulled straight through the stomach without being digested properly, and then it goes into the gut before it's really turned to chine. So we're going to add the rest of these nuts to the blender here. So I've got the rest of the nuts and seeds. Just going to pour. I like having lots of whole nuts and seeds, so there's just quite a few. Just going to give this a quick blast on the in the blender. Doesn't need very long at all. And then we're just going to add those to our whole nuts and seeds. Now this is a really, really simple exercise. I personally don't do measurements. That isn't how I cook, unfortunately. Probably I've got about maybe 3 cups or so of nuts and seeds here. To it, I'm going to add my buckwheat flakes. Again, I do it by sight. You want to make sure that it's in good distribution, so there's not too much flakes. It can be too flaky, too dry potentially, or not enough flakes. It's too nutty. Okay, so that was maybe about 2 cups of buckwheat flakes. You could use other flakes like rice flakes, but I find that they're very hard. Quinoa flakes are very small. So there are millet flakes, yes, though it's a grain. Buckwheat is a seed, okay? So this is grain-free, gluten-free. Then to that, we're going to add whatever you might like in your granola. So I like raisins, so I'm going to add some raisins, or sultanas, mix those in. You could use goji berries. I personally used to use a lot of goji berries. In the last year or so, I've realised that I am actually allergic to nightshades, and I found out that goji is a nightshade, so I don't have goji berries anymore. I've also got coconut flakes here, the sort of the big ones, which I love. I sometimes add flaked almonds, which I also love. And here I'm putting in some cacao nibs, okay? And then we're just going to mix that all around. Just found a whole Brazil nut. I think I'll eat that bit. Just making sure that all the bits of nuts, you might find that there's the odd nut that didn't get crunched in the machine as well. It's okay. And then to this, we're going to add approximately somewhere between 1/4 and 1/2 cup of melted coconut oil. Okay. Okay, and again, mix that around. Finally then, I've got some organic cinnamon, and I'm going to... Now cinnamon's great because it acts as a natural sweetener. You can sweeten this if you want to. You could add coconut sugar, just add it in at the end. If you have a liquid sweetener like maple syrup or agave, date syrup or rice syrup, something like that, you could also melt it in with your coconut oil. So you just want to make sure that you have everything coated in the coconut oil, okay, and you've got a really great munchy cereal. Okay, now this isn't exactly raw, though you could, if you wanted to, just dehydrate that. I personally have never done that. I mean, I have done raw before, but I'm not raw now, and it's not something that I necessarily advocate.